Oh, did you like how it was episode 14? So I called it episode 14.88.
Nice.
Did anybody see that me trolling you?
I did not see it.
All right, cool. Huh?
What does that mean?
1488.
You're so lucky that you're ignorant of these
Wow.
things.
Is it a Nazi thing?
Yeah.
I feel like it's
Is
not.
it a Nazi thing?
Yes.
I feel like most secret numbers are a Nazi thing that you know about that I don't.
Most secret numbers in general.
It's like
Numerology
any-
is like
Wasn't,
basically it's structurally
Wow,
fascist.
don't tell that to Debbie,
Very
man.
true.
Right?
Wasn't one of the first Superman comics like revealing all the fucking inane, idiotic, childish codes the Klan had, and just like, embarrassed the shit?
Oh, it was like Dungeons and Dragons shit. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like the first one like revealed how dumb all the clans like names for themselves are, and just embarrassed the shit out of everyone associated with it.
That's pretty cool.
I feel like this is somewhere in Cavalier and Clay.
What are the names?
You know, like calling themselves Grand Wizards and shit. That
What
wasn't
are-
all
what
out
are
in the
the other
open.
ones?
Their ranks are all like Dungeons and Dragons. It's like Grand Wizard, like
Grand Imperial
Small
Dragon.
orc.
yeah, Grand,
Small orc.
yeah, medium-sized goblin.
How
like,
much?
Helpful dwarf.
How many Constitution points does our Grand Wizard have?
Chinless incel.
That's redundant.
Fedora, neckbeard. That's most of them. Yeah. So let's start the show.
No,
Let's fucking do it.
I don't want to do a show.
No,
No, I just
we
gotta
are.
find that.
We are recording.
Making a show
Wait,
is
there
an
actually
active
are goblins.
production.
It's literally they have grand giants, and every
See
province
you in
is
the
supervised
mic.
by a grand giant, assisted by 4 goblins.
Oh, are you talking about the KKK?
Yeah, this is real.
Wait, they have goblins?
Yes, they have goblins.
I
They're
thought
the
I made
assistants.
that up.
No,
Wow, that's incredible. I feel like goblins would be what they would call people of the tribe or something. I don't know. Oh, that's golems.
do have-
Golems.
oh,
My bad.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
different.
Get it right.
Well, I trolled you by calling it episode 14.88, and so you should know that is a not even a right wing, straight up fascist thing. The 14 is the 14 words, and 88, H being the 8th letter of the alphabet, 8.
Right.
You know
Heil
where
Hitler.
Yeah, Heil Hitler. There you
Yeah,
go.
did you see that tweet from like that was like an official immigration authority tweet that was literally like the 14 words?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was.
Yeah, it was more or less
Is
the
that
sentiment.
Is that like an
That's
accident?
not
I don't-
ominous
I
at
don't
all.
think that's an
That was
accident.
No,
like,
no,
usually
of
I like
course
roll my
not.
eyes at like look the secret fascist message of Trump. Like, no, that's yeah.
Those
it's
are the
right
moments
there.
like
I think the most innocent explanation that you can give it is that standard right-wing discourse has gotten so far in that direction that they can almost exactly pair to Nazi without even meaning to do it.
No, it was definitely.
And if they meant
That
to do
was
it, it's
totally
that much fucking
overrisk.
worse. But either way, it's
it was
fucking
like
appalling.
some social media intern who reads like farther right shit than his official job.
Oh, yeah.
Thought he was
I
doing a
spent
clever
so
dog
much
whistle.
time being afraid for other people, right? I'm afraid for immigrants. I'm afraid for people of color. I'm afraid for the economic underclass. But every once in a while, I'm like, ooh, should I be afraid for myself too? Maybe.
Well,
It's like the inverse of that when they came for.
Yeah.
First they came for the.
I mean, hey,
was
I
fucking pissed
could
about that.
I could be denaturalized. That's the thing.
All right, let's start the show.
First they came for the ICE officers, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't an ICE officer. Next they came for the Department of Homeland Security, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't part of that. Next they came for the cops, and I didn't say anything.
Then
And
they came for the billionaires.
Yeah.
I kept not saying anything because I didn't want to draw my attention to myself coming for all these people.
The Antifada is more than a podcast. It's a specter haunting the globe.
It is the synthesis of the two most frightening things for the cheerleaders of this reactionary hellworld.
One ravaged by the unbounded savagery of capital and its states.
Antifa super soldiers and Intifada.
Bash the bash in a global uprising.
Be prepared to enter.
The Antifada mindset. Hello and welcome to the Antifada. We are broadcasting not live from Left is Best headquarters, about a half-hour walk away from the gentrification-ravaged Gowanus Canal in the coastal elite bubble of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. I'm Jamie Peck,
I'm Sean KB.
and we are here with not one but two guests today.
Double trouble.
Our first is he is our second time guest. He was on episode 2, right back at the very beginning. Our friend Niral Shah. Say hello.
Hi, everybody.
And our first time guest here is our friend Alex Gendler. And I barely even know you. So maybe you want to say hi and explain a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, hey, what's up? Explain myself.
Explain yourself.
Yeah, that's
Justify yourself, and don't forget to talk into the mic.
Who is your Who is your father, and what does he do?
Well, I'm a Soviet agent.
Yes.
And
Got one.
yeah, and other than that, I'm a freelance writer. I live in Brooklyn, just like all you all. So yeah.
Bot or
Hi.
not?
I guess you guys can do like a Turing test on me during the show. And
That will be part of it.
That's 2 shows in a row where Turing test came up.
So
Gotta get some new material.
Or it's just an
somebody
increasingly
liked
important
that.
concern.
Yeah, that's true.
Somebody reposted what I said the other day.
The
on,
14 words?
on a left book group. No, the other thing that I said
Oh, okay.
about how a lot of people on the left probably wouldn't pass the Turing test.
Yes.
I mean, that's hyperbole, but like some, we all know. You know who you are, or maybe you don't, and that's the problem. Anyway,
well, bots don't have self-knowledge, so
true.
Well, they
not
did.
yet.
There were 12 Russians indicted recently. That wasn't you. You're not out on bond, are you?
no comment.
Oh, shit. Damn. Our infosec sucks.
Got to get better at that. Come on, millennials.
All right,
get
let's
it together.
start over. His name is Igor Grigovovich.
Yeah.
And not a bot.
Yep.
So,
So,
totally not a
I would like to start by asking our guests a question that we ask on every episode of the Antifada. I
Ooh.
think you know what it is by now.
Can I ask it this? I've got a special way to ask it this time.
Go ahead, babe.
Well, we've been accused of a lot of things, and one of the things we've been accused of is being postmodern neo-Marxists. We're trying to basically, through the media and through colleges, through academia, we're trying to destroy the individual in favor of the
Now,
collective.
wait, who accused you of this? Was it Borden Peterson?
Yeah, that guy. You know him too. Someone should indict his ass, send him back to where he came from. But yeah, because of that, I feel like it's unfair if we have 2 guests for them to individually answer, what their hate is. And in true capitalist fashion, I think they should maybe negotiate like a number between them and like come to some sort of conclusion.
Wait, as a sidebar, like, how good would it be if, like, the one silver lining of all this ICE bullshit was that Jordan Peterson got deported back to Canada?
Fuck. Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to happen.
Right before
but
you abolish them, send them back, and then, okay, they've done enough.
That's as their final act. Like, it's not going to redeem them, but
They still get the gulag, but
yeah, it'll be something.
Well, I think their final act, and I don't get behind Mitt Romney policies often, but self-deportation is always an option.
That's true.
Sorry, babe, I interrupted your flow.
Go back to Nassau County. No, I want the 2 of you guys to come collectively to a level of hate. Let's say between 1 and I'd say 1 and 10, but that's not fair because there's a lot of gradation. So where would you guys be together, Niral and Alex, on a hate scale of 1 to 100?
Hate towards
Just purity of hate.
How pure is your hate today? Did I stutter?
well, that fucking
Somewhere
never
around
sucks.
88.
Oh, if his is at 14, we're in trouble.
Uh-oh.
Come on, guys. This is a game. This is the free market at work here. Right? Let's come to a number. So you got 88 over here.
I'd say my hate these days is a pure 96.
So could you guys compromise?
Yeah, like a B plus.
Yeah.
Oh.
Like A minus, right?
We'll take like 89.5 hate as long as it gets rounded up to an A.
All right, yeah.
You got
that
it.
Works.
Well, we'll see how the episode pans out before we grade you. But
Yeah,
that
that's
was
respectable.
that was a good collective enterprise there. We really destroyed the individual in both of you.
So we are recording this on a Monday because we were supposed to record on Sunday, but somebody went a little too hard on his birthday.
Who could that have been?
I don't know. Wait, did I just dox you?
Yeah, slightly. That's
Someone
all right.
went a little too hard at his birthday party, which may or may not have been on his actual birthday.
And I may or may not still be hungover from when that happened. Those days ago.
Well,
Yeah, I wouldn't know anything about that.
getting older, that's what happens.
Well-
Happy birthday. Here's a 3-day long hangover.
Alex was there, and not only was he there, but he was there till the end of the night. He was one of
Indeed.
the bar closers. There was what did we get down to, like 5 at the end of the night?
Yeah, well, people came in and out throughout, but we met up with some people first at the one bar that we like to hang out at that I won't say the name of, and then next at the other bar that we like to hang out at that I also won't say the name of, and that bar comes with certain people attached to it, and we hung out with them, and it was very nice.
What I liked was that you had people who were bad faith, ultra leftist, armchair radicals like Alex, who were at this bar, and Jamie set it up so that it was also It also coincided with a DSA new members welcoming event. So she was basically trying to like get this left deviationist to join the party.
Careful, babe. I've already been accused of being an ISO wrecker once this week. Can't get it from you too.
Well, that was last week, so this is the first time this week.
Oh, right.
So,
Well,
Alex, do you feel like maybe you were one step closer to
the edge, and I'm about to break.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for finishing my sentence.
it was a nice event, though. A lot of new members came by at the new member social, and they talked to us. They talked to each other, which is always what we want to see. Like, I really like the idea of having like this class of 2018 that comes in
The
together.
DSA class of 2018 is the beginning of their class consciousness.
Exactly. They help each other. They figure it out. They read the pamphlets. It's great. It's going to be great.
Does that mean 4 years till the revolution / graduation or something?
From your mouth to God's ears.
Who would be like the dean that they play pranks on and stuff?
Ooh, that's tough. Bernie Sanders.
Michael Harrington's corpse, or
Whoa, we're playing Weekend at Bernie's / Weekend at Harrington's.
class of 18.
So good. So, despite Sean's hangover, I managed to have a lot of fun yesterday. I was a bit hungover myself, but
I was praying to the porcelain god. I was kneeling before this throne all day.
Which I knew was serious because Sean has thrown up like 5 times since I met him.
I have probably the strongest drinking stomach, maybe the strongest drinking constitution. Yes, I was gonna. That's actually very good to qualify that. Up until yesterday, I used to have the best, but maybe I hit this magical age, which I will not name, and it's all downhill. I'm gonna be like a 3-beer loser.
Well,
see what I did there? I don't,
Well,
Yeah.
that's very good.
A
very
no
good.
boozer loser.
There you go. That's good.
So, despite Sean's hangover, like
Sorry to anybody in AA out there. Niral hates you.
our friends got these.
He just shrugged and
He's
put it.
not saying shit.
Sorry.
It's good. Keep
very,
it close.
I'm very
Keep
proud
it
of all my
secret.
sober friends, actually.
Keep
Yes,
it safe.
as am I.
Shout out to sober friends. I'm sorry we hang out at bars so much. We'll try to have some dry events for you somewhere down the line.
But there's no like coffee shops open until 4 a.m. Are there?
Well, that's
Diners.
where the Kava Bar
Diners.
comes in.
Yeah, that's true.
That's why we
New
like
Jersey
the Kava
Pride.
Bar.
Right? Yeah. Long Island Pride.
That's why we're helping to organize the Kava Bar, which is still ongoing, by the way. It's like just let them have a union. Jesus Christ, there's like 7 people who work there, and they all want to have a union, like really fucking badly. Just don't be an asshole. But anyway, so our friend gave us these magical passes to get into the David Bowie exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum on the last weekend of the museum exhibit, and I thought it would be really nice to bring Sean there for his birthday because he loves Bowie.
Huge Bowie fan. Have been for many, many years.
And I mean, I like Bowie too, but not the way that Sean does. And I knew this wasn't going to happen. I was like, if we wait till Sunday, we're just not going to go. And then he was way too hungover.
Well,
so
let me say this about that. It is true. I screwed the pooch on that. It would have been great. I'm very excited to hear about the exhibition that you went to at the museum. However, I'm probably the only person in this room who has seen him in the flesh and been within inches of David Bowie.
Tell us about it.
Wait, how many inches?
He's got about 6.5. Well, he did, anyways.
Too soon.
Damn, I went there. Yeah. God, can I tell this whole story? Let me pause for a second. I'm not sure if I can tell this. Andy, hold on.
You can do it. You can do it, babe. I believe in you.
I'm just trying to think of what I should leave in and take out based on what happened. Okay, all right. Yeah, so I'd say maybe, 15 years ago or so, Moby was headlining a tour, and
Who?
exactly.
Boo, Moby.
And at that point,
Negative shout out to Moby.
negative shout out with your tea rooms and shit. Moby was actually headlining above David Bowie at this failure of a tour that they had, and we were
Toured with Moby?
if you believe it or not.
Jesus Christ, I didn't know that.
Well, fortunately at that time, I didn't really care about Moby, but we had a mutual friend. She was a very attractive young stripper, and Moby happened to be a huge fan of attractive young strippers at that time.
You don't say.
And Moby gave us 4 backstage passes to his show, and we hung out with Moby for a while, which was really nice. But
I
David,
was just kidding before. I have nothing against Moby. If you're listening, Moby, I'm sorry.
Oh, I do. Check the link I just sent you.
oh shit! All right, things are heating up. But yeah, so you could see David Bowie's dressing room. It said like David Bowie on it, but there was a phalanx of guards. So I was standing in the hallway, and finally, as Bowie was going out to perform, his entire entourage came past.
Wait, were the guards like dressed flamboyantly in any way? Were they like?
They had kimonos. Yes, you could just imagine it. It was like some Zoolander shit or something. But at any rate, according to my friends, as David Bowie walked by, he gave me a look and he gave me a smile, and they said he gave me sex eyes. I made eye contact with the man. I did not say anything to him, but he could tell I was in awe. And I like to think that somewhere in David Bowie was still that crazy, wild bisexual from the 1970s, who maybe wanted to get 6 inches from me or closer.
Yeah, I mean, that you were quite a tasty little twink back then. So,
that's so sweet of you to
wouldn't
say.
put it past him.
So you guys went to an exhibit, so that's something.
Yeah,
Well, we did. Once we realized that you guys weren't using the tickets, everyone was kind of on me to take advantage of this opportunity. And I thought, if I can convince Jamie to go, then I don't have to do the podcast, because I said I would, but I'm hungover and I'm too dumb.
My thoughts exactly.
But
A
here I am.
trick.
Here I
Methinks
am.
a trick you have played on me.
It was pretty incredible, though. My attention was taken up largely by the first 2 panels of this 9-room exhibit, where for no particular reason they just mentioned the construction of post-war socialism in Britain, which is one of my favorite things in the world.
Oh, there you go.
A completely ravaged, impoverished country that decides they're just going to eradicate squalor, want, homelessness, ignorance, all of it.
Except for bad teeth.
The 5 great evils, and then the one minor evil maybe they'd get to later.
Cosmetic dentistry is bourgeois. So.
Oh, okay. You heard it here first, folks.
Before capitalism invented Invisalign, actually, the more crooked your teeth, the more interesting your personality is what people
That
thought.
is true.
David Bowie had quite the personality then, because he definitely had British teeth. But I'm
He had a
sorry.
bit of a snaggle.
He would have been too perfect otherwise. That's
This is
one
true.
thing one of my many takeaways from this was that David Bowie was really hot.
Yeah, he also had 2 different colored eyes, but that's because he got whacked in the head when he was a kid.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not catch that. See, that's what ADD does to you. I
Well,
did not
I don't think
catch
that was in the exhibit.
But
every
did you
little detail
guys
of the
did you
exhibit.
guys see? Because I went a couple of weeks ago. Did you guys see the little cocaine spoon?
We did. We
did
heard
see
about
the
it. We didn't find it on our first pass.
It was right. Oh man.
Yeah,
I took 2 additional passes through the whole exhibit just to find it.
I had heard that the Coke spoon was there, and I very much wanted to see it for some stupid fucking reason. And it was there. It was in. I mean, the exhibit isn't going anymore, so this won't be servicey advice. But it was in the big room with the big giant screen with all the concert footage,
Yep.
and everyone takes their headphones off, and the music is loud and awesome. And there it is, just shining like a beacon in the night. The very spoon that carried the cocaine up Bowie's schnoz
What I really loved
in
was
the most insane period of his life.
like the little caption that came along with it. Like whatever museum intern, I imagine they were struggling to find something appropriate to write about it, and the way it was phrased was really funny because it said something like, although David Bowie's cocaine use increased drastically, this did not affect his creative output.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
The
yeah.
although was
It's
why would you do you know how cocaine works?
but of course, the Berlin period is him off cocaine and 3 records of
Right.
cultural output that are
And-
horribly disturbing
It's
and
sad.
great.
Peak cocaine period, by the way, is 19 unfinished movie scripts. And David Bowie's plan to invent the electric car or something.
It said,
He was the Elon Musk of his day.
Oh my god!
I think it actually said, although his cocaine use negatively impacted his health, it did not
right.
impact his creative output.
Have you-
Yes, that was right. Yeah.
I mean, the quality was actually pretty good, but as Niral pointed out, they did display it next to some of the dumbest ideas he's ever had.
Oh, well,
There
somebody
was-
had a brain when doing that
there were,
exhibit.
there were all these notes that he was writing that, I guess it was plans for a stage show, but it also seemed like plans for a factory that he was going to destroy every night. And the note said, they never carried this out because it would have been too expensive.
Oh man, Coke ideas are awesome. Everyone comes up with such great Coke ideas. Did
Hell
you
of a
guys?
drug.
Did you guys ever see Cracked Actor? I think it's 74 or something like that, 75.
No.
It's I believe it's the one. It's it's a documentary / concert film. and it is it's peak cocaine Bowie, and the guy is like rail thin. Like he was always thin, but he was like rail thin, super pale, and you just see footage of him, and he's got a lot of ideas, all the time, and he's got a case of the sniffles. But the amazing,
like most of the ideas were still good. That's the
it's
crazy
Bowie.
thing about Bowie. Like,
but the wild thing that comes out of that movie is that apparently for like years he just survived off of milk and peppers.
That's like the worst combination of food I can think of.
Yeah.
That's very close to my actual diet.
Well, I mean, milk is how you neutralize like something after eating something too spicy, right? So
Yeah,
I'm a lactose.
he was all about
so
balance.
right.
It's just ghost pepper sauce. And
Yeah, he's just punishing himself further when he drinks milk. It's true.
He has a spicy palate.
And then after the Bowie exhibit, once we figured out we weren't going to do a podcast, we went to go see Sorry to Bother You.
Well, wasn't there an issue with before you get to that some sort of cultural appropriation you were referring to?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, as I went through the exhibit, I was sort of thinking thoughts about it in my head and what I
think
might want to
thoughts, too,
talk about
sometimes.
it and talk about in the podcast. And one of the things I noticed was like, yeah, he pulled from a lot of different places for inspiration. Some of those places were non-Western cultures, and he was especially into Japanese garments like kimonos. And there was this Japanese designer that he did a lot of collaborations with on like really cool outfits.
His very first band was really a blues band, and this is like, I don't know, the late 60s. It's not that far from the idea of a white musician doing this at all being almost a direct taking, if cultural appropriation ever is, a valid claim, not to give away how I feel about it. But when it's closer to the theft, you'd think it's more quote unquote problematic. All the way through the late 70s, where they have a video of him doing Fame on, if not Soul Train, then
It was Soul Train.
Yeah, something like that. And I think, I don't know, today would that fall prey to accusations of cultural appropriation?
Oh,
Probably not if you're popular
definitely.
enough. You get away with it if you're popular enough.
Oh,
Your
you think
popularity
people
might
wouldn't
drop.
write posts on Jezebel about it?
Yeah, but who cares about that?
A lot of people online do.
I mean,
Online,
this,
yes.
I'm not saying this is the same as David Bowie playing rock music or wearing kimonos, but that band Viet Cong had to change their name because enough people were angry about it.
But it's such an inchoate anger, with Viet Cong. Is it that it's offensive to talk about this, that it's not yours to talk about, that it's not yours to name your band after?
I mean, what
I
about
think the
Gang of
second-
Four?
Yeah, right. Exactly. That was appropriating, the leftist Maoists. That's not fair.
They're grandfathered in.
There was also like he was really inspired by vaudeville. He was he went to mime school, I believe.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Right.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
actually good representation of his miming background. And a lot of talk, and he never really was that successful as an actor, but his physical acting was definitely brilliant. It
Yeah.
probably comes from his miming experience.
Yeah, his stage presence. Even when I saw him, like, if I saw him in that tour, it was probably 2003 or whatever. He had to have been 60, maybe. And dude, he killed it on stage. Like he was still doing it.
One thing I noted though is that it's kind of amazing how much how inescapable it is that you need time to cure the awkwardness of how somewhat recent time periods seem to you. I remember growing up, being a teen and thinking the 80s was the most embarrassing moment of culture ever. And now I just fucking love so much about how batshit 80s aesthetics were, how weird they got with using synth music in whatever way.
Wait, how old are you?
I'm 31. But you look at Bowie in like the late 90s and early 2000s now, and maybe I won't feel this way in 10 years, but I recognize that haircut in the way he's kind of got blonde highlights, and even his affectation on stage, it's very much of that time. Or the way certain tracks are dancey, reminding me of like New Order at the time. Like,
Right.
This might have been your least cool moment, or that might just be an artifact of not enough time having passed.
Yeah, that's fair.
But he managed to stay relevant for so long, and he kept like, like all the '80s icons pretty much like were like went to shit in the '90s,
Or died.
right? Like no one cared, but like he managed to like survive the '90s.
Even Madonna, I guess.
Isn't he? He's sort of like somebody asked the question like, could a David Bowie exist again today? And it's interesting to think about, because if you think of the folks that arose like in the 60s or the 70s, it was really like people who could ride these different waves and reinvent themselves over and over. So there's Bowie, right? He goes through all these sort of different phases based on the time, but also based on nostalgia and these artistic ideas he has. But then you have Dylan too, right? Dylan, who like changes his styles up over and over from the early 60s up until the 70s, and then like he kind of sucked for a long time, but now he's back with really cool music again in his old age.
He kind of stopped evolving at a certain point in time, though, don't you think?
Well, I think this idea.
I'm talking about Dylan.
Oh, Dylan went into his crazy fundamentalist Christian phase, and that was really bad. But then in the last like 7, 8, 9 years, he's put out some really cool like roots type music, like shit that it's not my favorite Dylan shit, obviously.
Dude.
But
I personally find Dylan to be interesting cultural figure and probably a good poet, and his voice makes me want to like fucking shove nails in my ears.
I'm sorry, Armin. I'm never going to listen to the
Armin.
Dylan songs that you email me every week. Oh, our friend Armin likes to email us the weekly Dylan, and I always read the emails because they're very interesting, and Armin's a great writer, but I do not listen to the songs.
And he also likes the Grateful Dead a little too much. That's suspect.
I think on the question of artists reinventing themselves, there's sort of the cranky old man response, which is that people today just don't have the attention span. But I also think another way of looking at it is that the music industry isn't as closed, top-down, and controlled anymore, where there's only so many musical figures around, and so the ones who already have fame have such a leg up and the opportunity to reinvent themselves. And there's probably something lost in that, being able to be the musical 1%. But instead of having that all across,
the aristocracy.
three different people reinventing themselves now.
1% of the musicians.
We have this incredible wealth of music, and we might be able to experience something much better than that across a much larger number of people. But there is something that's quite not the same in admiring one larger-than-life figure.
Yeah, actually, that's a good way to look at it, because it was an industry, like a real industry, like Hollywood, was an industry and made stars and made movies and directors. You're right, you don't really have that as much anymore.
It was great, though.
That's what you just
said. It's funny, Tony Visconti, apparently, there's a thing in the exhibit.
Visconti is
he
awesome.
refused, of all the hits, he refused to produce Space Oddity. And the reason why is that he thought Bowie was just doing way too much of a commercial gimmick. And it's not that the song itself was too gimmicky, but that Bowie wanted to time it with the first moon landing.
Yeah.
So Visconti refused to produce it.
That's
but
fucking brilliant.
The BBC aired that song as they broadcast the moon landing, and he got his first bit of national attention.
Well, I think that's kind of the key to what you were saying before. There was a much more, the whole entertainment industry was a much more consolidated, kind of almost quasi-monopolistic thing back then. So you could have you almost had this sort of you could have an artist like Bowie who would have these like major like TV appearances where he could like choreograph the whole performance and like design the costumes, right? And
he gained leverage over his label too, as being a megastar,
right? And sort of incorporate like theater and everything like that, right? Whereas now it's a lot more kind of fragmented, and it's like it's more of a sort of an assembly line kind of thing.
Well,
it's like
except
these
for
people write music, these people make songs, like
right.
these
or
They still
bottom up
tried to
scrambling for
do it.
attention,
right?
Or like
pop stars still try to do the Bowie thing,
Like Lady Gaga.
I was gonna say. Or
I don't know, Beyonce
on
to some degree.
Super Bowl.
Marilyn Manson ripped him off heavily at a time when I really liked Marilyn Manson. And
this is way out of my
just kidding.
wheelhouse.
We
But I
all
think
grew up in the
Beyonce.
90s, come on.
I think Beyonce is actually a really good example. Like this isn't, obviously it's not my like hugest area of interest, but that's someone who's basically just trying to do pretty new things with the form. Like releasing a surprise video album is not a thing someone had done before, let alone someone of her prominence.
Yeah, shout out to Beyonce.
Shout out.
Also, I just want I was just thinking about this the other day because they had that room in the Bowie exhibit that was like all the 90s stuff that he did and got into, and like
I'm afraid of Americans.
I really liked
Yeah.
they actually didn't even have that video that he did with Trent Reznor, but they had the video that he did with the same director that directed a lot of Marilyn Manson's most iconic videos, and he toured with 9 Inch Nails in like 1993 or
And
like
he covered Nirvana's "The Man Who Sold the World."
yeah, and like
Good
Took me
one.
a second
Yeah.
there.
Well done.
it was a really good Nirvana cover. And like how many musicians that started in the 60s could you even imagine touring with 9 Inch Nails or
Well, hey, Johnny Cash
covering Nirvana?
covered 9 Inch Nails, right?
Wait,
very,
what?
very well.
Oh yeah,
actually.
yeah, that was a really good 9 Inch Nails cover.
I
that
think
Johnny
what
Cash
makes
did.
Bowie really incredible, though, is that not that these 90s artists were particularly homophobic or anything, but not only did Bowie maintain his credibility, but he had gone all the way to the edge of pop and disco and glam, and still, these brooding masculine types in rainy-ass Seattle wanted everything to do with him.
Yeah, because
Right.
he was a major influence on the music that
On
they
all of them,
liked.
yeah.
And I think the first time I can remember Bowie coming into my consciousness was definitely Labyrinth. I
Every
definitely watched
woman
that
about
as
your
a child,
age, every
and-
woman about your age, babe, like that David Bowie package that he
You
brings
know.
to that movie, I think that was a lot of women's
mean,
awakening in
yeah.
terms of.
God,
My first
that is
exposure was a
like-
girl I was dating who made me watch Labyrinth. So.
That is like such a
6
typical
and a half,
man
right?
thing to say. It was not about the package. It was about the whole
whole package.
androgynous package. Exactly.
He
And
definitely.
then,
yeah,
but the
go ahead.
second exposure I had to Bowie was probably when he toured with Nine Inch Nails. Although, you know what? I was too little to be into Nine Inch Nails that year. So I probably like found out about it in retrospect. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And like how many musicians who started in the 60s could do that and work with a 90s musician in a way that didn't come off totally cheesy and desperate. And it was because he influenced Trent Reznor. And then Trent Reznor might have influenced him back a little bit. And it was like a beautiful fucking interplay.
Yeah, I mean, have you heard the first Nine Inch Nails album? It was like total like synth pop. Like...
Oh, I've heard it.
Wait, the one with had like a hole on it? Or,
No, before that.
Oh no, I never heard that.
Pretty Hate
No,
Machine.
no, not the first Nine Inch. The band that Trent Reznor was in before Nine Inch Nails was like a total
Oh.
glam synth pop band.
Oh, I thought he was in.
Even though Pretty Hate
I
Machine
mean,
was pretty synth pop.
Pretty Hate
itself,
Machine
yeah.
was to some degree a synth pop album as well. It was
Right,
just, like,
but
a
but
dark and
before
depressing one.
yeah before NIN he was totally like just in a synth pop band.
Like
Really,
if,
we should look that up. Whatever
If
that is.
Spotify could
Maybe
pull
outro
up
with it.
the songs that we have listened to the most over the course of our entire lives, like even before Spotify was invented, that would definitely be in my top 5.
I'm sure AI people are working on that.
Do you guys have Last.fm accounts? I have one that's been running since I reset in 2006 because it got depressing how much of it was Elliott Smith.
We were all there in 2006.
It's been tracking my
I
listening
think my
for over a
MySpace
decade.
account is
Story
still
checks out.
around somewhere. I don't know. Like
It never dies. Nothing ever dies.
Okay, so unless anyone has anything else they want to say about David Bowie, we got to keep it moving.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one last thing. Like, there's a group of people, and they had a really hard time in the mid 40s, into the 50s. That I think David Bowie was guilty of culturally appropriating when he went and he gave that Hitler salute in Berlin. I think he was really trying to appropriate Nazi culture, and that's just not cool.
Yeah.
A lot of Germans, they resented that at the time.
Well, maybe this is too far gone of a sidebar, but
Never.
when you're talking about cultural appropriation, trying to find the difference between appropriation and I guess cultural syncretism, so much of the music we like, the mod era, first wave ska, that has everything to do with post-war Britain bringing in tons of West Indian people to basically enable the country to function, and this actual mixing and this interaction of real human beings between Jamaican immigrants and working class British people, and it produced and laid the foundation of some of my favorite music. And it seems dumb and beside the point to talk about who took what from who, especially when you're talking about what succeeded from it 40 years later.
Yeah.
Okay, but on the other hand,
Get out.
it also led to the Mighty Mighty Bosstones. So maybe...
Counterpoint.
Don't you tar what I love with this Massachusetts third wave
Hey.
fucking nonsense.
Ever since
The
I found
impression
out,
that I get is that most ska is pretty good.
ever since I found out that the trombone player
Come on,
from
Niral.
guys, ever since I found out that the trombone player from Real Big Fish is following us on
is.
Twitter, I felt much more conciliatory towards third wave ska. Apparently, he's like a DSA guy or whatever.
Yeah, and as I tweeted out to all the people out there who talk shit on him when we announced that he was a fan of ours, if you are between the age of, say, I don't know, 30 and maybe 40 years old, you could pretend you didn't have a ska phase, but you had a fucking ska phase, all right? You had creepers. They were two-tone, okay? You went to the fucking shows. You had the fucking special sticker on your car as you drove to it. So don't pretend you weren't into it. Everybody was into it.
picked
Not to
it
mention,
up,
Real Big
picked it
Fish's
up.
biggest song ever was called Sellout. It's about the agony of looking at conventional success and money versus holding on to your values. And if it's not a realer thing for DSA itself to be considering, then I don't know what is.
Wow.
We got the Real Big
Damn.
Fish caucus over here.
We could all learn something from that guy, I think. Shout out to that guy.
Shout out.
I hope that you are a patron. Oh, and speaking of patrons, we have a very exciting announcement to make.
Announce it.
And that is, we have officially not just reached, but surpassed
We blew past.
the magic number of 183 that we had randomly chosen because our friend Debbie told us we needed to pick an interesting number. It's better than 200, so 183.
And it's one more than Blink 182.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
So-
We should have.
And it's one of the few numbers left that doesn't mean something in like Nazi symbology. So.
Not
Pretty
yet.
much.
Not yet.
So now We are. Oh, I don't know if we're gonna actually work on the captions or if we should just release it because that's something I don't know how to do and I'm probably not going to. But we will be releasing our world historical debut of our cooking show known as Acid Kitchen. And you may see a few familiar faces in it. You got me, Jamie Peck. You got some of my friends who shall remain nameless at the moment. You got Niral screeching at us off camera about how we're fucking up all the food. It's great.
He was the voice of reason at Acid Kitchen. Which he's not even touching that one.
Like, I like the moment. I mean, there are many Easter eggs in Acid Kitchen, but I should probably put some or at least like write it out so people know what the fuck we're saying because I've watched it enough times so that I pretty much know what we're saying. But there's this one part where I turn to my friend Debbie and I'm like, I can't tell if Niral is actually mad at us. And she's like, me neither. Oh, well.
Oh, wait, Debbie's on this?
This is the tricky thing when you try to evaluate my hate at the end of the show.
So, speaking of people we hate and things we hate, our hate remains ever pure for our favorite hapless capitalist, Mr. Elon Musk.
If only all capitalists were so hapless, we'd be doing better right now. Yeah, there's been a lot of Musk news. We covered a little Musk in episode 11, but Musk just keeps throwing himself out there, so we're just going to keep reeling him in like a big fish.
I just love the word Musk. It's great. It's just it's a very strong Musk.
It is, and if his name wasn't like... he's got basically a supervillain name.
He has a great name for a capitalist supervillain. I don't know if everyone's familiar with the Hank Scorpio episode of The Simpsons.
Oh, of course.
But I've grown up just loving that and wanting to be Hank Scorpio if I can't be a useful socialist instead. But
really only two options.
Be the Hank Scorpio of socialism.
I'm already tipping my hand way too much in how I feel about Elon Musk.
Well, we're going to get to all of Niral's contrarian views on Musk and all of Alex's ways that he's devised of torturing the man once he's finally thrown in the gulag he deserves. But for those of you who haven't been following the news this week, Elon Musk basically out of nowhere threw together some crappy little mini sub, and by that I mean had his engineers design a jerry-rigged device in order to help with the rescue of these Thai kids who were trapped in this cave. It's actually a pretty inspiring story, what analog technology like humans in dive suits could do, like swim through small crevices and save small children.
And it's also a very Silicon Valley thing, like let me act like a savior and over-engineer the shit out of something no one fucking needs. Like, Elon Musk, like a juicer-road the fucking Thai cave. Except, at least juicer-road can make fucking juice.
Well, you didn't even need the juicer-road, right? You just suck it out of the bag.
Exactly, which is
with your hand.
Which is exactly the whole thing. You didn't need the sub. You could just pump the water out.
I get it.
The juicer worked.
All right. So he sorry. So Elon Musk juicer-road himself into this whole situation, and his mini sub was not wanted. It wasn't needed, and I think people were like over there were grateful that he was like trying to contribute something, but they looked at this thing and they're like, yeah, that's just not going to work.
Do you think he was just waiting for some Thai kids to get trapped in a cave to unveil this mini sub that he had designed?
Do you think he like geo-engineered like the flood and the disaster to?
Oh, you think he controls that HARP thing, the HARPA thing that controls the weather too?
I would not put it past him.
The fucking chemtrails, like.
Even if he does it, he wants to, right? He'd love to control the weather. That's the thing, right? This is the Elon Musk thing. That's why we're doing This Week in Musk, is because it's always fucking something with this guy. Last time he was a utopian anarchist. He went through the entire political spectrum. He ended up as a, anarchist. And this time he's like trying to save these, what are they, a soccer team, right, out of a cave.
He definitely has like a messianic savior complex about him. I think he's also kind of socially fucking ineffectual ardent engineer. I think he saw a problem and just way too much fixated on what he could build. And then when he was told, that his help wasn't needed, he apparently didn't take it that well.
No, he didn't take it that well at all. In fact, he went somewhere, I can't imagine going there myself. Maybe you guys have some ideas about it. But he basically called the guy who is, in charge of this very complex operation.
This British diver,
children.
British expat living in Thailand.
Yeah,
who was the main diver involved in the rescue operation, and who basically said,
at first politely said, Musk's contributions were interesting, but ultimately not needed.
Which is fair. Only like a megalomaniac would be like, you asshole, you're a fucking pedophile. Right?
Yeah,
which is
well-
where Elon Musk went, which is why he's back in the news right now. He
Elon
called him
Musk-
a pedo.
Which is why, hey, not everyone who wants to save kids from a cave is a pedo. Okay?
Not everyone who spends their life in Thailand searching for relatively unexplored moist holes is a pedo.
I mean, the British expats in Thailand. I mean, like we all thought it for a second, but none of us would make that accusation publicly.
The Elon fanboys on Reddit were actually like, I bet Elon had his spies looking at
Oh
this
my
guy and
God.
find
Oh my
out.
God, seriously.
Now, let's suppose that's true. They don't hesitate or stumble over, I bet Elon had his spies in Thailand. Like, maybe he has them. He's fucking nuts, but...
I mean, it's pretty fair that he did call him a pedo, not just because he's a British expat, but because that's also just a very normal thing to throw around on the internet and double down on it. He called him pedo guy.
Are we pronouncing it with the British?
Pedo.
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 The guy did say, this British expat did say, that Musk has no conception of what the passage was like. The submarine, I believe, was about 5'6" long, rigid, so it wouldn't have
Wait a
gone
minute.
around the corners or around any obstacles. So I could
So
see
it wasn't
Elon-
even as long as David Bowie.
Let's go and let's see. Do you guys think that which pronunciation is better, pedo or pedo?
I think it's pedo.
Pedo?
Pedo.
Well, let's see what the
It's
experts have to
AE.
say.
That's an encyclopedia.
No, but the Brits
No,
say pedo because
yes.
there was if you guys watched the IT Crowd, there was a whole episode that centered around the fact that she was dating a guy named Peter File, and when he
Friends
said
with Mike Hunt.
and Moss suggested that you could always move to America because then they pronounce it pedophile and then there's no problem.
Well, let's let the experts hash this out. Go ahead and play the clip, babe.
You know, Jez, I've started to get this feeling that I'm totally fucked. You know, everything's fucked. I fucked my wedding. I fucked up my only ever relationship. Everything's just completely fucked.
You have been feeling this for a while.
But now I'm starting to think that maybe that's a good thing, because now I can get on and do everything I've always wanted to do. Join Mensa, learn the clarinet. I could be a scout leader.
Mm-hmm.
What are you smiling for? Look, scouting is a noble tradition. You do not have to be a pedo to want to work with children, right? But it probably helps. Oh, God, that is so... I spent 5 happy years in the Scouts and never once did...
You told me Kinky Leighton was all over you.
Yeah, all right, Leighton was a bit of a pedo, but not in a bad way. Just boosting you over the climbing wall, making you run around the camp in your pants. It was old-style pedoing, before it got such a bad name.
Of course, Leighton only really had eyes for Duncan Carpenter, the doe-eyed little flirt.
Oh,
That will never
God.
stop being
that.
good.
That is from the show Peep Show.
One of the best shows.
One of the best. If you haven't seen Peep Show before, you have to just watch one and you'll watch all of them.
But this
It's so
is,
good.
this is kind of the most, I don't know, ridiculous thing that Musk has done recently. But Musk is one of the favorite objects of the left and really everyone online to dunk on very, very heavily. And, I'm the minority here, so why don't I let you guys take it?
Wait. Before we move on, so he called this guy a pedo in a baseless attack, and now the guy is threatening to sue him. And somebody retweeted this story and said, like, yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich. But I think this shows that you can, right? Like, he's got the lawyers and or the money to pay so that he actually can say whatever he wants about any person at any time. And that kind of calls back to our point in the question asking episode. I don't remember which one that was, a few episodes ago, where we were talking about, like, how to convince a libertarian that they should have better politics. And one of the things is, like, okay, if you believe in freedom of speech, like, there are other things restricting people's freedom of speech besides the government. And, like, do you really want to live in a society where the amount of freedom of speech you have is determined by how much money you have?
Well, not even Elon believes in only the absence of negative restrictions. 2 fucking weeks ago, he was pissed about a report about his company that was in Business Insider and basically tried to create Verit for tech news in a publication that he, I guess, obliviously wants to call Pravda.
That was so
that
good.
polices and enforces quote unquote truth in journalism.
And this is how ANCAP basically becomes, either fascism or Nazism. Take your pick.
For those of you who don't know, Alex is referring to National Bolshevism.
Oh, right. Sorry.
No, it's good.
And for
we
those
need
of
to
you who
define
don't know,
these things.
anarcho-capitalism.
Yes,
but-
anarcho-capitalism.
But okay, so Elon Musk is such a fertile topic.
He's a messy bitch, is what it is. He's
Many different.
all over Twitter.
Yes, we have many different ways we're going to go on this. What should we do first, guys? Should we talk about Grimes? Should we talk about his dad? Should we talk about his psychology? Take your pick. We're going to do all of them. So,
Actually, I don't know. I think why to you is Elon Musk bad? He does fucking ridiculous things. He embarrasses the shit out of himself. Half the reason people dunk on him isn't even because he necessarily is being that terrible at every moment, but because he fucking responds every time. And he's just so easy to get a rise out of. But
that is true.
on
Yeah,
net, overall,
like our president.
why is he
He's
kind of like supervillain number one right now?
Well, most people in the ruling class are just kind of above us and won't interact with us on Twitter and won't get mad, or they won't show that they're mad when we take pot shots at them. But Elon Musk is very different.
But that's almost a good thing, I would say, right? That's kind of where you're going with it. But I think the reason people hate Elon Musk, or the people on the left hate Elon Musk, is because he's, and I mean, it's kind of, it was Zuckerberg before this, right? It kind of like
Concurrently, I would say.
yeah, like he's very representative of like precisely the sort of like capitalist that like neoliberals try to foist on us, which is like, oh, I'm gonna solve the world's problems through my company, through capitalism,
Innovation.
Yeah, through
Through
innovation.
Here's the
And
thing.
government subsidies, P.S.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't really matter. It's hypocritical of us to point at someone who's produced something and say, oh, it doesn't count because you had government subsidies.
Oh, it's not hypocritical of us to point out hypocrisy in a fucking
I
libertarian.
mean, here's the thing, though. If every
he's not a
fucking tech
libertarian,
idiot who
right?
thought, no,
No, he's
he's
an
not.
He is.
anarchist.
Oh, right. He's a socialist. I forgot.
right. Marx was a capitalist because
I mean,
Yeah, you remember that one. Yeah, that was
I think actually of all the idiots who claim to be capitalists, he's the arch capitalist. I guess my question is, other than him being an arch capitalist supervillain, what do you have against him?
Do we need anything else?
I think so, because for all of these Silicon Valley fucking assholes who, just because by dint of the fact they happen to have made $1 billion in lighting VC money on fire, think they're the savior of the world, he actually has produced something. If capitalism is supposed to give us anything at all that capitalism is supposed to do that socialism or communism can't, it's innovation. And the fact is, unlike Facebook, which is, okay, fine, it is actually a new thing, or it was a new thing, or Airbnb and Uber, which just interject intermediaries to allow a few kinds of transactions to happen more and more frequently. Musk has actually created a few things. If you only believe that he's an effective car salesman, he's been an incredibly effective car salesman. He's terrified the shit out of the entire auto industry and thrown them all in the course of 2 years to rapidly change gears towards making electric cars. And yeah, he's messianic. He thinks he's going to save the environment, but the fact is this is one of the biggest sources of carbon output ever. His power wall and his power grid stuff and the solar roof that ever fucking works, it actually has the possibility of basically solving the intermittency problem that creates a limit on the amount of renewable energy we can produce. So he's not quite the full useless piece of shit that most self-proclaimed capitalists are. There's Juicero, and then there's a mass-market electric car if he actually pulls it off. And even if he doesn't, he's forced the whole industry to go in that way. If we're going to want... He's a capitalist who actually acts like one. Warren Buffett...
like an Ayn Rand type capitalist.
Well,
an Atlas
no,
Shrugged
maybe
type
not,
capitalist.
because he thinks he's doing it for the common good, which would
Oh,
fucking
okay.
make Ayn Rand roll over in her grave.
But he is like as
says he's
they
doing it for the
imagine the
common good.
entrepreneur to be this heroic figure
He's
who battles
absolutely
and
the
innovates
heroic
and-
figure. He
yeah.
views himself as the heroic figure. But, the most adored, cuddly capitalist in America, Warren Buffett, is a fucking mean, useless piece of shit who hasn't fucking produced a thing in his entire goddamn life.
That ass.
He's
yeah.
an investor. He cobbles together assets. He provides financing when no one else will. He uses his own credibility to make that financing work better. Usually extracts pretty terrible terms for it. Doesn't necessarily help the companies that he buys. He's a believer in monopoly. And, you guys are going to fucking murder me for this, but there are variants of capitalism that suck more than others. And there are ones that basically give none of the benefits that capitalism is supposed to and make life more immediately painful for everyone. Buffett's a monopolist.
well-
Musk is a guy who at least has produced a fucking thing. A new thing. He invented a fucking thing.
What's destroying the environment in the first place? What got us into this predicament?
Industrial production. If you want to attribute that to capitalism, fine. But the fact is, under any version of socialism or communism we would want, there would also be mass industrial production. And whether or not, it's not obvious to me that that version of it would have fewer deleterious environmental effects.
Well, I went to a talk at the Socialism Conference, which is something I should probably talk about at some point on the show because it's very on topic. I won't say brand because that's a capitalist term.
Jamie became a trot. She came home a trot.
Yep, I sure did. But like, I went to a talk on Marxism and the environment, and I heard one of the more compelling arguments that I've heard for why we have to transition from capitalism to some form of socialism. And that is that under capitalism, the environment has no value. Capital sees it as an infinite free gift, right? Because, you know, things only have value when people have put their labor into it. Like, you can't quantify the value of a forest or an endangered species. And they actually have given people, like, in an effort to sort of quantify the dollar amount that companies need to pay for destroying these things, they did surveys where they asked people to put dollar amounts on them. And a lot of the answers were, like, protest answers because those things just, like,
well, you get
priceless.
You get things like willingness to pay, which is actually the basis of how the EPA values things and determines the cost-benefit analysis of doing environmental protections. But I mean, for Musk, you have this guy who's either on the cusp of, you know, blowing up his company or basically becoming one of the world's richest men by massively reducing carbon output. So it's not
and
that
yet
capitalism
he can't log off.
Yeah, no, he's a fucking idiot. He can't help himself. But
I
well,
will
wait, to finish the thing that I heard at the conference. I asked a question towards the end, which was, and he had gone through, you know, how capitalism it needs to continue expanding or everything's all fucked up. You know, I'm vastly oversimplifying this for the show, obviously. And you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet, which is why all the great capitalists want to go to space now, because that's the only way it's going to continue. But he said, I asked him, like, what is a socialist approach towards this policy-wise besides, you know, long-term horizon and capitalism? What's the short-term goal here? Is it a Green New Deal like Jill Stein wants to make? What is it? And he said something pretty depressing. He cited a study to me that I should probably track down and look at that said, yeah, of course, in the short term, Green New Deal, best option. But the amount of economic activity that would be generated by that would basically cancel out any positive effect on the environment that it would have. And that was just depressing as fuck.
So this, like, Malthusian mentality has been tried before in the past, and it's turned out not to be true. And maybe this time it will. Maybe we probably will destroy ourselves. But, you know, this kind of gets to what is my reason for standing Elon Musk.
I never pegged you for cuck, Niral.
That I deserve to be fucking made fun of for the most, which is, sure, maybe we can't have infinite growth in the way we have it now, but that comes down to this idea of what the constraints to growth are. It's this idea that we can't have more, an ever-increasing number of inputs. But what productivity is the idea of creating the same or a larger amount of output with a diminishing amount of input. And these are technological breakthroughs. And for whatever vision of the future we have, we probably do need technological breakthroughs, or at least the more we can maintain or increase people's standard of living by extracting less, communism becomes more possible, socialism becomes more possible, or at least capitalism becomes less injurious to people. And I think we live, and this has less to do with Musk, but I think we live in a moment where we're sort of at one side of the S-curve of technological development, where things have slowed down, and that, you know, a generation change doesn't see the world transformed in the way it did before. It gives people less hope about what's possible for the future. And having this psychotic hyper-capitalist, actually a visionary, out front, at least claiming that we can massively structure how the economy works, isn't the worst thing ever. His fucking pipe dreams, some of them are dumb. His literal pipe dream, the Boring Company, is based on basically nothing he's proven about how we can dig a tunnel faster, and a horrible misconception of what public transit is and what it should do. But others of them, I think we need an idea that life can be transformed. And visionary capitalists are better than Buffett capitalists. Elon's idea of, okay, colonizing Mars is fucking stupid, but reusable rockets aren't. That was actually a useful thing.
I
think we
admitted
need vision and hope.
I've admitted that before. To be honest with you, seeing that that rocket go up and then land itself again afterwards, like that
It saves a massive amount of resources.
It was incredible. I mean, what I will concede, Niral, 100%, is that we should not be judging Elon Musk any harsher than we would any other exploiter.
Oh, of course
But
not.
of course, as you said there's Warren Buffett capitalists and Elon Musk capitalists. Now, in the technological perspective that you're talking about, and I do agree with you, that we need massive innovation, that we do need a complete sea change in the way that we produce, not just energy but everything, right? Elon Musk is as much of an exploiter as any other. But what I will concede,
He's worse in some ways.
Sure, the Tesla workers, I think,
Because he's one of the few of these people who actually creates a tangible product. He's got a factory floor, and he's got the oldest problem in the world, but he wants to do nothing innovative about how hard his fucking workers' lives are. For as much as I want to stand for him, he does this stupid shit on Twitter, and that's one thing. But the fact that he doesn't like the fucking color yellow and that his workers keep getting gored is fucking unacceptable. You want to impress me? Like, yeah, if you want to convince your workers not to unionize, make their lives so good they don't care, but you haven't gotten fucking close to that.
He's no Ford, that's for sure. It's no Fordism.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, this is what I was kind of trying to say before, which is that I think part of the reason that the left sort of has, like, a hate hard-on for Elon Musk is, in a certain way, he's like both appropriating and bastardizing some of their ideas, because it's supposed to be our idea of like creating a vision for a better world that's sort of collectively managed and like a positive vision of the future.
And the idea that a capitalist can do it is threatening a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, and of course, the other fact is that what it should be is that I mean, the other problem is entrusting all that power to just one individual or one corporation of like deciding what the future of our public transit and our energy should be like. But I would say that's actually the value of Elon Musk, because he brings up these questions of like, okay, we need to totally re-envision how we think about public transit. We need to totally re-envision how we think about energy. But when he's saying it, he says we, and he means me.
Elon's sole vision.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works. What he's done for Australia's power grid is amazing. What he's going to do for Chicago's public transit is going to be fucking useless.
Let's stop right now with the he. Okay, because again, when we look at things, in the grander scheme of things, right? Elon Musk is not in there with a computer, doing all the calculations himself.
Right.
Under capitalism, under any social system, there is collective social labor that makes these things happen.
Absolutely.
Now, and Niral, I don't think you would disagree with that, right? But
not at all.
Your argument is basically that as his visionary, he is leading
this
group of people.
I'm not saying he's entitled to his wealth or that he should be allowed to act the way he does.
Well,
but there is a thing on the left that's like the "you didn't build that." The thing Obama said towards Musk as well, that it's his factory workers who have built it, which is absolutely true,
and the engineers who designed it,
and the engineers who designed it. But it's also probably some amount of his input.
Sure.
He's probably a smart engineer. Underwater kitty coffin aside.
No, when I read, because I did some research on him, when I read about him, it did say that he was actually building mini rockets as like a 12-year-old. He was one of these real nerdy kids. Yeah, nerd alert.
It was fucking insane upbringing. Yeah.
But
Speaking of nerd alert, I think I read something about his childhood that makes me think about a general thesis I have about these technocratic nerd kings we have now and why I find them so objectionable. And can I just read a little bit of this to you guys?
Go for it.
So in an article headed Elon Musk wants to change how and where humans live, Musk, who went to school in Pretoria, says that the bullying was so bad that there was even one occasion where he had to be admitted to hospital after being beaten up. He's quoted as saying, "South Africa was quite a violent place. There was a level of violence growing up that wouldn't be tolerated at any American school. It was like Lord of the Flies." So now, setting aside for a moment the fact that that's the worst violence that he thinks was happening in apartheid South Africa, which actually we're not going to set it aside. I'm pretty sure we're going to fucking talk about it.
We're going to talk about it, right?
But like the idea that someone could be bullied and then grow up to become an exploiter and then react very badly when he's consistently mocked or just covered by journalists in the media, it really speaks to this unique psychology of our
put upon
new
nerd.
Technocratic rulers. Exactly. Because after being bullied, he then gained this mentality that he has not yet lost, that he is forever the underdog, and he couldn't possibly be the oppressor. So when somebody covers the things that he's doing, even if they are quite exploitative, he still feels like the victim in all that. Like when he said, "Oh, billionaire has become a slur." Like he
I think you're
actually
dead
believes
right that he acts like a hurt kid with a victim complex.
Like it reminded me of the time that I met Skrillex. Actually,
Oh shit!
Oh,
Another
shit.
meeting. Go ahead. What's this story?
at South by Southwest one year. I was doing my, gonzo journalism thing, and I met Skrillex backstage at a party that he was playing. I think it was a Fool's Gold showcase or something. And he's about 5'4", so he's about level with me. Eyeball,
Stumpy.
Manlet.
Stumpy like
He's
you
a-
are.
Manlet.
He's a little manlet.
he's eyeball to eyeball with me, just like his little brown eyes peering directly into mine. And I told him I was writing about the show for MTV Hive, and
R.I.P.
and our interview would be, or not interview, but like our conversation would be on the record. And all of a sudden he just looks so scared, and he's like, "You're not gonna write me stuff about me, are you?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And no. And he just launches into this thing about how, like, you don't even understand what it's like to have people all over the world who don't even know you say mean stuff about your music all the time. And it's just really not cool. Oh, but the first thing he said to me, or maybe it was the second, I don't know. The two things he said to me were basically, he doesn't care what anybody says about him, but also many of the things people say about him are extremely mean and unfair. And, like, dude, he's got like 5 Grammys for his like horrible shit
What
music.
do you think his
like,
guarantee is for one night of DJing? $20,000-$30,000?
Like he
way,
probably,
way more
and like
than that.
he's actually a worse example than Elon Musk, right? Because he's not actually a capitalist exploiter. He's just a very, very highly compensated member of the working class. But like
Yeah,
he
he's a
has
petty
this
bourgeois.
eternal underdog psychology.
A lot of
that
people
will never
who
go
are
away.
hyper successful in capitalist society see themselves as underdogs. That's why you don't really see the children of privilege making it quite that far.
Well, it's like I got bullied in school, and I use that as inspiration to fight bullies wherever I see them. And some people just use that
do
as
they, but
inspiration to
Elon's-
become the bully.
Elon's bully is Ford and GM in his mind.
And this is exactly, yeah, I mean, I guess so. But also it's everyone taking pot shots at him on Twitter. And like, this is literally why we don't have Gawker anymore. Like,
Oh, yeah.
they
Yeah, I mean,
consistently mocked and talked shit on Peter Thiel. And they also
Genuinely evil nerd.
Oh, yeah.
genuinely evil nerd.
Actually,
And they
way worse
also-
than Elon Musk.
worse.
They also did something much less defensible, which was to out him against his will, which was controversial and still is. Like, I don't know how
Should
many
be.
people are on Gawker's side about that. So they gave him a fucking reason to single-handedly execute their website, which most of these assholes could do. Like, if you read a story about Mark Zuckerberg that he doesn't like Facebook has the power to unilaterally execute any media outlet that they want. Just by choking off
for-
the
The
hold on,
traffic.
hold on.
Onion's been on a pretty
So-
big crusade against Zuckerberg lately.
Well,
right?
for the
Who has?
Is it the Onion? Like they just kept publishing like a string of posts like making fun of Mark Zuckerberg.
They're cruising for a bruising.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
like, that
go
makes-
back to the story because I'm not sure all the listeners know about the Gawker thing. Like,
Oh
what
my
did Peter
God.
Thiel do?
Okay, so Peter Thiel, he said, so Gawker did something pretty controversial when they published a sex tape that they had been leaked of Hulk Hogan sleeping with his friend's wife. And I guess they said it was newsworthy because he'd gone on TV or on the radio and said that he did not sleep with Bubba the Love Sponge's wife. So there was like news value in that. They released it. And then there was this very well-funded lawsuit that Hulk Hogan was filing against them.
How was that funded?
And eventually it came out. Peter Thiel himself actually came out with it in a New York Times op-ed and said that he was funding it because Gawker outed him against his will and have said a lot of mean things about a lot of friends of his, and therefore they deserve to not exist anymore.
Which brings us back to your point that you made earlier, which is free speech isn't actually an absolute right, nor do all of us have the same amount of it, because Peter Thiel, Thiel, whatever.
I think.
Thiel, he can shut you down. He's got the money to destroy your company through lawsuits.
And the further capitalism progresses, the more true that's going to be. The more the money and power is concentrated in the hands of these few fucking people. And these ones, like, they're not even cool. Like the old ruling class, they did all kinds of cool shit
knew
with,
how to
with
party.
their surplus value.
Yeah,
These
oysters
ones,
and-
They built follies on their land, just follies. Literally a fucking thing you build on your estate that you know is useless just because you
I don't even
can.
know what that is.
Like David Bowie on a coke binge. Carnegie had some wild ideas on how to raise.
There's one British aristocrat who built an underwater ballroom and smoking room. You have to go down the stairs underneath
Wow.
the fake lake that he made.
They
Yeah,
had
where's your smoking room?
they had
Peter?
garden hermits. They would like literally just pay a vagrant to dress in like medieval
Oh my
clothing
God.
and live on their property and like dispense
Wow,
dispense vague wisdom to like anyone who wandered past.
that could be my
I-
backup plan if the podcast and media world it doesn't work out for me or for anyone. But
I
what-
kind of did that for a tech bro friend for like a good 6 months
Wow,
in California. Yeah,
really?
yeah.
Wait,
I
wait,
mean,
Wait.
what's the deal with that?
I want to know so much more about
more.
this.
Tell us more.
well, no, it was kind of. I was living in his like backyard house on his like weed farm.
Is this like tech bro entourage? Go on.
Yeah, and it was just I had free housing in exchange for being the sort of I'd help him out on the farm, and otherwise I was just living as a hermit on his little backyard
Wow.
house.
Dispensing gnomic wisdom.
Yeah, well, I do that all the time anyway. So
Might as well get paid for it.
Yeah.
Wow. If any tech bros for some reason are listening to this and they need some like cool communist friends to come like live in their pool house and dispense communist wisdom, like that might be able to be arranged. But the point that I was making about these people is that like they are the new center of power, and like I'm not the only person who's made this point. I'm sure Gawker made this point as well. But they are the new center of power in the world and especially in this country, and they still do not see themselves as the ruling class. They still see themselves as
Right.
some kind of underdog. So when the media covers them, like we cover any kind of power, any center of power, any people who are having power over the rest of us, they take it as a personal slight. They don't see that that's just like the essential check that
They have
exists
But
on
to-
their power
PTSD
in the world.
flashbacks to getting wedgied.
Yeah,
in
and
front
they
of a locker.
don't just want to be powerful. They want to be popular. And they're starting to realize that money can't buy that. So,
Well, apparently, though, it can get you Grimes, who I'm not saying I thought I was going to end up with Grimes. All right, it'd be ridiculous if I expected for many years that I was
Absurd.
going to end up with Grimes. That would
Clearly.
be unreasonable. And yet, it's seemingly gotten that. But to go back to what we were saying about Musk before, I don't think that, or at least I'm not saying that I think it's fine that he's a billionaire with this much power to swing in whatever direction he wants, though pretty fucking ineffectually because of the way he goes about it. But I think it's interesting that, our target for the capitalist most worth dunking on isn't Lloyd Blankfein or Jamie Dimon or Warren Buffett, but it's this guy just because he makes himself most visible and he makes himself most irritating. He is most irritating. And the thing is, this goes to a deficit, not just in the media, but in the left as well, in terms of analyzing production. When it comes down to it, when it comes to imagining what socialist future we want to have exist, there's a hard question you have to answer about how things get made. And to not be able to differentiate between a billionaire who makes something and a billionaire who just fucking steals by lobbying is a major problem.
I was really thrown by your stand for Elon Musk. I thought you were going to go a completely different direction. Like I was
What
trying.
do you think I was going to do?
No, I was playing devil's advocate in my own head.
Yeah.
And because I'm a history nerd, nerd alert. I went back to other great infrastructure projects of the 19th century. So space was a place that we went. With massive government intervention with NASA, right? The
Completely a
moonshot.
state-run operation.
Yeah, state-run operation. And then after the impetus for that, which was essentially, Cold War dick swinging went away, we basically just kind of gave up on these dreams, right? These incredible visions of going to the moon again, or building a colony there, or to go to Mars, or even farther.
And the idea we could radically transform life.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
That went, by the mid 70s, that went by the wayside. Not that, innovation stopped. Obviously, satellites, geopositioning, all this continued. But where I thought you were going to go with it was like the early railroads. All right, as an example, which was a revolutionary innovation, right? The ability to move from one place to another in a direct line and very, very quickly. Revolutionized not just, the economy, but also people's lives. So I thought the argument that you were going to make, which might actually be plausible, is that under within the capitalist system that we live in, right? If you're going to have massive investments in things, it's going to come ultimately from capital, either in the form of taxes or in the form of private enterprise. So when the railroads came about, it was basically a government grant. The technology existed. The government gave a grant to these railroads to run these trunk lines, all over the United States of America, gave them massive amounts of land, not just to run the actual tracks over, but on both sides of the tracks, which they then sold at a profit for speculation as towns.
To finance the rest of the construction costs.
And creates this huge bubble. They invest in the railroads. And then, of course, as time goes on, you don't need as many trunk lines, and then eventually by the 50s, 60s, almost all of them are out of business.
The unprofitable bits fall back to the state if they're left open at all.
And then it comes back into the purview of the state with what we have now as Amtrak, right? So I thought the argument you're going to make, which is, could be compelling, would be that, let the capitalists futz around and fuck around in space for a while and throw all their capital at these very innovative, crazy ideas let's fly a Tesla car into outer space.
Let them try their moonshots.
Yeah.
And if one of them pans out,
socialize it.
Although for the most
Communize
part, those, fuck profitability, let's just see what we can produce. That kind of R&D has almost always come from the state. The state abdicated from it for a long time, and now concentration of wealth has gotten so out of hand. Jeff Bezos, because his workers are already so well paid, can only think of going to space as his main goal. But now there's enough capital pool there to do it. There's no reason for this to be, solely private. But yeah,
Wait, that was sarcasm, right? It's hard to tell sometimes with Niral.
Well, I mean, there's a general sort of crisis that capital has right now, which is there's so much concentrated wealth, and yet there's so much there's so little clearly profitable investment. That,
and by the way, the main capitalist argument for allowing these people to retain their wealth is that the fact that they've already earned it proves that they're the best allocators of it.
Right.
Clearly.
But yeah, what were you saying?
Right. Well, that's why they're literally throwing their money at. That's how you get Juicero. That's how you get stuff like Juicero. Literally, because we're past the era of very clear profitable investments like railroads and infrastructure and even mining.
Or in
ideas.
this equilibrium, we're totally past it. I mean, the non-obvious idea is probably the next revolutionary one, but there's an econ writer I really like who I guess is nominally capitalist. He goes by Interfluidity. It's interfluidity.com. But he has this line that's
Interfluidity is really big in Silicon Valley too. They have some crazy parties.
Yeah, I bet. There's this line that necessity is the mother of invention, and he always says purchasing power weighted necessity is the mother of invention. We have an economy where there probably are things you could invent and build and revolutionize life, but we don't have an economy where anyone could afford to buy them, so why bother?
Well,
right, exactly.
I was going to say before, all of the obvious tech ideas have been taken now, such as PayPal, process your payments online, such as...
Where Thiel and Musk both got their money from.
Yeah, all of the obvious ways to disrupt, quote-unquote, disrupt certain industries, a.k.a. get around unions and labor laws. Those have been
just be
taken.
A new intermediary.
Those have been thought of. Well,
it's a replacement for the medallion.
Yeah, exactly.
In New York City, right?
But the medallion itself was it was not any better.
No,
right,
and they go for millions of dollars now because they were
not
commodity.
anymore.
Well, they did before Uber came in. But I think that what we're kind of getting at is that there is some sort of fundamental way in which these sort of disruptions or innovations make sense. And I'll take Airbnb as an example of a way that you have a quote-unquote innovation. It's this app you use, and you can stay in people's houses when they're not there or use their extra room.
It lets us maximize use of resources.
It solves a real issue, right? Which is and an issue that is dealt with individually on Airbnb when you go and you pay money to somebody else in order to rent out their house when they're not using it. However, if you imagine that to be socialized or communized, right? It makes perfect sense. You can imagine an app where there's a finite amount of houses or housing, but that's way more than any one person needs at a given amount of time. Yeah, so it's using
these platforms could be immensely useful to a state that actually.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Right.
The left line on Airbnb and Uber shouldn't be no, these are bad. We should go back to the regulated hotels and taxi companies because those were good.
I really want the Waldorf story to pull in.
Yeah, no, it should be it's the technology and concept is good. What we need to do is not have like this be controlled by like a proprietary company that just like
with a
skims
profit
off
motive.
money
With a profit
not
motive.
have a situation where people have to rent out their rooms to strangers because they can't
Right.
afford the
Right,
rent.
That's
yeah,
the flip
yeah,
side.
that, that, yeah,
Or that the
that too.
effect of Airbnb on rent is so injurious because we haven't socialized any housing.
Right,
So
exactly.
Everyone's the vagaries of the rental market.
This is the
But still,
problem.
when you call these things disruption, I do, like, this is the last fucking thing I'll say about it, I promise. I think there's a distinction to be drawn between innovation as a new way to be an intermediary, even if it does free up or enable the better usage of existing capacity, and making a new thing. And I think an electric car is a kind of disruption that we needed. It's long fucking overdue. And, you know, not totally worth casting aside as just another Silicon Valley piece of shit like the Juicero.
It's going to be very useful once we nationalize his company. So thank you.
Or just communize
Thank
it.
you, Elon Musk.
Skip over the nation state part of it and just communize that shit.
But what I was going to say before I was interrupted by three men was
We erased your voice. We're
Well,
sorry.
actually,
that they God, I lost my train of thought.
It worked,
Fuck
Alex.
you.
Good job.
No. So they're
We'll get her to shut up
oh
eventually.
my God. I feel like I'm back at work, you guys.
Oh shit.
That's no good. No. So they're running out of ideas now of things that are useful or needed or obvious, to the point where I believe Niral and I had an experience with one of these new apps on a recent trip to Hudson. You remember that?
Memory and trips to Hudson don't really line up very
Well, if you recall, or perhaps you don't, we rented an Airbnb in Hudson. It was very nice, old building.
A vacation home that was fallow the rest of the time.
Right.
Yeah, but the way that we were supposed to open the door was through an app called Kivo.
Kivo.
It's like the Juicero of doorknobs.
I never heard this story. This is incredible. They disrupted doorknobs.
So
Wow.
it's an app that,
Not necessary.
So you use your phone to unlock the door via Bluetooth.
Oh my God.
Only Bluetooth never once worked on my old phone and probably doesn't work on my new one, or maybe I just can't figure it out. I don't know.
and if your battery's dead, then
Yeah, right.
My battery was, as happens at a music festival, my battery is pretty low. Also,
I've been locked out of my house for 3 days because I can't find a phone charger.
we were there for a 24-hour drone festival. So as you can imagine, we were coming home at a pretty late hour in the night, fairly intoxicated. So we got it to work once. We got it to open the door at the very beginning, and then we couldn't get it to work after that. So we just left the door unlocked. Like, that was our solution to
You had a
it.
house on that trip?
And we were all talking about it, and we're like, you know what technology really doesn't need to be disrupted? A fucking key. Like, it is the alligator of technology in that it has not evolved since the very beginning, pretty much, because it's fucking perfect.
Well, doesn't
I
this
didn't
go,
know that
does
about
this go back
alligators.
to what Alex was saying, though, about
Alligators are
nexus of
perfect.
capital versus like meaningful, life-improving investment opportunities? And alligators probably aren't that well adapted because they only exist in the American Southeast and one little tiny pocket of China where there's like 200 of them left.
Wait, maybe I have it confused
Crocodiles.
with the
Crocodiles?
crocodile. There's, it's an animal that hasn't evolved for like 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Okay?
Cockroach.
We'll put it in the blog post.
It's
I
like
thought
perfect
it was an
like the
alligator, but
cockroach.
it might be the crocodile. You fucking know-it-all, mansplainer.
Well, I don't think that we can finish out this Elon Musk situation without getting at the
Pitchfork.
elephant in the room, the cockroach or the alligator in the room, which is that for all the stories you hear about Elon Musk, he happens to be from a place called South Africa. And in research for this show, I perused the World Wide Web, which was, I think, a very good innovation.
By the state.
Yes, right. But then
DARPA.
By Al Gore.
privatized, of course, by Al Gore.
all hail.
All hail. Make
Comrade Al.
Make America gory again.
What's 88 for Al Gore?
So getting back to Elon Musk's background, right? Because he was born in 1970 in South Africa. It's very, very difficult to find online any mention whatsoever of the conditions he grew up under, which, if people know their history, was the condition of apartheid, which was explicit racial segregation, a small white ruling class of 8% of the population, not only ruling over in a state, ruling over the state, but of course being the chief capitalists and exploiters within South Africa at that time. So when, Elon Musk says South Africa was quite a violent place, there was a level of violence growing up that wouldn't be tolerated in any American school. It was like Lord of the Flies. You have to wonder how he is so myopic at this point in time to not see the larger or remember the larger violence that was happening in South Africa.
Right, and I think this ties into what we were saying before about how all these sort of nerds see themselves as victims even once they've grown up to be capitalists, which is kind of reminiscent of when apartheid finally ended, when South Africa was dragged sort of kicking and screaming to end apartheid. A lot of the white the white community that had previously been the ruling class saw themselves as victims and as this oppressed minority within the new South Africa. And I mean, while Elon Musk hasn't publicly made statements to that effect, it's hard sort of not to see the kind of parallel there.
Oh, yeah, you mean like when he says that billionaire is a slur?
I mean,
that?
It's actually hard to know what his take on South Africa is. Obviously, they're a place that's very eager to claim him, and he seems to want to have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, because
he left in the late '80s when he was 17 to avoid military service, or maybe just because he saw no potential for himself there, which is another way for some of the whites who left at the same time is saying that if the tide is going to turn, I don't want to be here. I don't know if I want to attribute that to him. There's a Rolling Stone interview with him that I really love. Actually, I think it's really humanizing, and they bring up his father, and he starts crying. And among the things that his father did, one of them that's vaguely referenced there is his father once murdered 3 people that came onto their property. His father also married Elon's stepsister.
Jesus.
And his father was, among other things, an engineer who worked at mines and owned shares in Emerald Mine. Actually, some of probably Elon's first seed capital, so to speak, would be emeralds he stole from his father and sold to a jewelry store in New York, I think.
I respect
Where
that.
were those mines? Were they in
Zimbabwe?
Angola,
actually.
You mean? Or
I think the emerald mine in this case was in Zimbabwe.
Rhodesia.
Maybe Rhodesia. Probably not Biafra.
That's a joke, folks, because Rhodesia was actually what they called white apartheid Zimbabwe before it was freed by independence fighters. But sorry.
Yeah. So Musk, I don't know whether he's. I don't need to call him a racist. I do think it's kind of interesting though that he probably was so personally affected, and to give him all the credit in the world, maybe horrified by what he saw, and yet he can so easily still fall back on this idea of himself as an oppressed person. The other thing in that interview that makes him cry is that he is just heartbroken. His last relationship has failed, and he's crestfallen over it, and doesn't really see a purpose in life really without a meaningful partner to have.
I feel like I've dumped on Grimes before on the show, and I feel kind of bad about it. I just want to emphasize that when Matt Lex says that she's white girl Kanye, there are 2 sides to that coin, because she's really dumb about most things. I felt her politics were always very shallow, the way she would, at least as I understood them from what she would write on Tumblr. But she is also a brilliant producer and songwriter, and I will probably be listening to her music for a very long time.
If she does a Bowie and stays relevant, if dating Elon Musk does not ruin her career amongst the social justice warriors out there.
I hold out hope for her future and our future.
Well, just as a show of good faith to Grimes, maybe I'll sing one of her songs right now.
Really? You would do that on the show? You would do a karaoke rendition of Grimes just for us?
Don't make me sing.
Sing for your supper, baby.
I think if you're going to do it at all, though, I think you should sort of emote how this might have possibly changed her. How time with Elon, a muskier Grimes, I guess is what I'm asking for.
Musky Grimes. That
All right.
sounds so sensual.
I'll do my best.